general practice, we're heading possibly for Stoptober as general practice, figuring out what on earth to do with the contract changes and what does this mean for your practice and your patients. We're going to cover that, including some letters that have literally just dropped minutes before we started going live, as ever, as we tech enhance your primary care and learning. Hello, eGPlearners. Learners. Welcome to this live stream where we're getting ready to talk about everything that's happening in general practice, including the big thing that everyone in general practice is talking about, which is the 1st of October, or as I'm going to start calling it, Stoptober, but for other reasons. How are we doing there, first of all, Andy?
Yeah, pretty good. It's been a hectic week, as ever. I feel I've seen you a few times this week.
We have. So weirdly, me and Andy have probably had more contacts in the past week than we've had in the past month, I think, isn't it, Andy, in terms of stuff that we've been doing? Yes, very, and face-to-face, not just remote. And some of that will relate to all of you eGP learners out there, because we have been doing one thing, which I'm briefly going to mention, and that's scouting venues for our next PCN Plus conference. So those of you who did have the opportunity to join us in April will remember that we held it in Nottingham. We're doing exactly the same next year, but we've got a brand new venue that we absolutely love, didn't we, Andy?
Yeah, it's fantastic. They're just finishing it off. It's the new University of Nottingham sort of business and conference facility that's just in Nottingham city centre. It used to be the HMRC building. It's got quite an iconic sort of PVC roof, which doesn't sound as good as it looks, I think, just having said that.
But it looks amazing. Yeah,
it's going to be great. Anyway, so watch this space.
Yes.
And we will tell you all about that in coming weeks and months.
Very much so. So absolutely, you will have the opportunity to join us, and you will need to be quick because this year's one sold out within a few weeks, and we still had like 3 months to go before we even went live with it. So you will need to be quick, and we will update you when that goes live. Absolutely. However, right now we're going to start talking about other stuff. We've got a full episode, haven't we, Andy? We're going to try and get through this as quick as we can because we have been asked by all of you to keep this brief. So what are we covering today, Andy?
So the theme is the contract changes that have been mandated by by NHS England to take effect from the 1st of October this year on how GP practices operate. There are two parts to this. So one was that GP practices will be obligated to keep their online consultation tools open to unlimited numbers of queries from 8:30 in the morning to 6:30 in the evening for core hours, and they'll be required to provide a response to patients, not necessarily concluding their treatment, but a response with a human behind it to those queries on the same day. And GPs are really worried about that. The other part is that GP records need to be open to receive information from GP Connect, and there's a lot of concern about the quality of information that will be written into GP records, and actually the responsibility that GPs will need to take for records produced by people outside of their practice that may contain information that patients shouldn't see, not suitable to see, or that will need redacted before patients are able to view those records. So there's a lot of potential concerns as data controllers. So those are the two things. And really, we're talking about the reaction to those, Gandhi. So do you want to take us forward from that point?
Yeah, so I think the key thing here is that, as many people know, we've covered it a few times, there is this significant adjustment to the contract. Now, we've argued in some ways it's not a significant adjustment as people think, but clearly it is having an impact in terms of how things will happen in terms of general practice. And the key thing is because it becomes contractual for practices to keep their opening hours, then that is going to have a real impact. And just to clarify, we said it's not significant, it's partly because of the statutory notice. It's just a clarification of that.
What Gandhi means is that actually this story is sort of 2 years old. So in 2023, the contract was varied using a statutory instrument. We were surprised. It seems the government can vary our contracts without our engagement and without an act of parliament if they deem the change worthy or significant enough. And that's when modern general practice was introduced, where there was parity of access type, online, telephone and face-to-face, and there was a requirement to provide a response on the same day, although the impact of that was blunted somewhat as online consultation tools were not required to remain open. Practices were routinely capping the number of online consultations and had quite a lot of control in how they managed those. And of course, GP practices have been applying safe working principles from the BMA in an effort to manage unmanageable workloads. But this has an impact on those measures. And in fact, as we said before, you can't cap the online consultations from the 1st of October. And you have to respond to them on the same day with a human in the loop, not just an automated sort of response.
Yep. And I think that's causing massive concern across practices who feel that they clearly do not have the capacity to man that system up until 6:29 on any given day. And also, how do you manage that at a point where general practice is already heaving under capacity challenges, and where, whilst we're treating, I think the rest of the government will say, we've given you increases. Actually, a lot of those increases have been eaten up by other things that we know about. For example, national insurance changes, national living wage, and various other increases outside of things. For example, cloud-based telephony charges. I know many practices are talking about the fact that those costs are considerably higher compared to platforms they would use previously, and just general cost of everything going up like everything else. So, there is this question of how much capacity does general practice have? And actually the resources and the safeguards in particular is the key thing that we'll be talking about right now. So let's have a quick look at the thing that has literally just dropped in the past few minutes. So much so that, partly when I said to Andy, when are we going live? I suggested we do Friday because I kind of figured there might be something coming. I'll be very clear. No forewarning, no details and stuff, although I can appreciate some of our colleagues, Monsieur Ahmed, are thinking it was absolutely planned. And I'm not quite sure what this means. Yard arm definitely has been passed. I don't know. Not quite sure.
Sounds like a nautical analogy to me.
Maybe
Barry can tell us what he means.
Maybe. But let's have a little look. So the first thing we're going to look at is this update from the BMA themselves. So this is on their website. We will put the link down in the show notes below so you can go to this separately if you want to. But do you want to walk us through this, Andy?
Yeah, so essentially this is sort of BMA's position, I guess, as we go into the weekend. A little bit later on in the show, we might get into some of the sort of wrangling and toing and fro that's been happening between the BMA, GPC and NHS England and government figures, but essentially they responded before the weekend, I think, to provide clarity to practices about actually what position they should take, because there was a danger that practices might feel that they had air cover from the BMA not to implement these changes, and then not do them, and then potentially put themselves at risk of contract breach and measures from their ICBs were they not to be deemed to be behaving within contract. So they've sort of provided some clarity here. So they've said, to ensure compliance with the new contractual requirements and to avoid receiving remedial or breach notices from ICBs, practices must currently ensure the following from the 1st of October. So they're saying, yep, they have their online consultation tools available for registered patients throughout core hours. So that's up to 6:30 in the afternoon in order to request non-urgent and routine appointments. And the GP Connect functionality is available to receive those inbound information into the patient records. So they're clarifying that people have to do that, or that's the position of our trade union. They also go on to say the government's got one last chance at the Labour Party conference to avoid a ballot of members to enter industrial dispute again, and they're asking that the government ensures necessary safeguards to avoid patients erroneously submitting urgent online consultations are implemented before the 1st of October, and also that ICBs will explicitly be instructed not to issue remedial or breach notices until necessary safeguards have been put in place. So that's essentially. Anything else you want to cover? There's obviously a lot more there, but that's having skimmed that before coming in. Those were some of the main things which I picked up on. GP practices need to do those things, and
so
isn't happy about it. There's also a letter, isn't there, Gandhi? But we'll get there.
So we'll come to that in a second. So I think, the rest of this page then outlines some of the detail behind some of this and why this is of concern. It then talks around the different aspects and what they anticipate may happen. But effectively, the BMA is saying that, the Labour Party conference starts this weekend from Sunday onwards. And this is an opportunity for them to take a pause and think about the impact of potentially how these changes will impact general practice, because the view from the profession is very much that this is going to destabilize practices even more so, and that actually most practices won't be able to comply with it. And the concern of breach notices, which then complies with charges, and it's just going to lead to potentially to a domino effect in certain practices where this is just going to keep having more and more impact to the point where they will either break very quickly or very slowly, but still break. That's the key thing. And that's the concern from absolutely the profession. If you've seen any of the groups or the chats and stuff, it is just endemic that this is the worry that practices have, that they cannot deliver on that contractual notice. So what are they suggesting? Well, shall we talk about the... So the first thing I'm going to say about this letter, there's also some chats going on about the fact that, is this letter genuine? So this does seem to have come from the mailer from the BMA itself. And this is the letter that's at the bottom of that web page that we saw. And I will be honest.
Why are people asking if this is genuine or not? Is it because the positioning is quite soft from
I think that
BMA?
seems to be the impression, the fact that it is just coming across, we're almost at the 13th hour and this feels a little bit soft of a letter. In terms of what you would sign. So to read it out, I mean, we could read out in detail, but the key thing is basically the same, that from the 1st of October, that the practices does not agree with the mandated changes, and that we have concerns about, and then basically delete the ones that you are not worried about and keep the ones that you are worried about. And do you want to read those out, Andy?
Yeah. So, I mean, the opening is interesting. So it's a letter for practices to send to their ICBs, is what it is. Mm-hmm. And they're saying, we express our position regarding the contract changes, which mandate the availability of online consultation tools during core hours and so forth. Acknowledge the statutory nature of these changes and will comply with the regulations as required. But we must respectfully state that we do not agree with the manner in which these changes have been implemented. So it's sort of writing in to say, we're going to do it if you send this letter, which I think is interesting for a sort of protest letter. It's just odd a little bit in a way. I don't know, maybe it's just going above my head, but it's interesting. And then and then they say, and then you express, you'd say, we're working under protest. So that's an interesting phrase. I don't know whether legal advice has gone into that, but working under protest. And then they say, delete or retain as appropriate. Our concerns are around potential risk to patient safety, particularly in relation to the online consultation tools, where the absence of robust safeguards may lead to inappropriate use or misclassification of urgent clinical needs. Or B, delete or retain as appropriate the potential risk of data breaches or misuse of data by other NHS providers in relation to GP Connect. And then further, our practices' concerns are specific to the following requirements due to come into effect on the 1st of April. And then it says what those requirements are: continuous online consultation tools being switched on through core hours, which the BMA's GP committee has made clear that necessary safeguards around managing online consultation requests are not yet in place, and GP Connect update record being switched on despite concerns by the GPCE and Royal College of GPs joint IT committees around functionality, lack of indemnity for data breaches with other NHS providers, and it being fit for purpose. Of course, so that's things coming in, but it's also visibility of the record out, isn't it, to other providers as well, which we might not have been clear on before. So I'm just thinking about the legal function of this letter. I think it's saying we'll do it, but we don't agree it's safe. And I'm just wondering if that positions you in a more defensible place if something goes wrong through implementing these changes, which you don't agree are safe. I'm not sure. I'm still getting my head around that, and I don't think the BMA were quite clear about if this has a legal function. But anyway, hand back to you, Gandhi. How do you feel about the letter?
I mean, I think many people would read that and feel it's just a very, very soft letter, and that's probably the best word I can describe to use it. Now, as Andy mentioned, I suspect that a lot of this is couched in terms that covers people legally, covers the BMA legally in terms of where their position probably is coming from in terms of trying to advise practices about what they can do. I think, I suspect, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, I think a lot of this is hedged around the fact that because it's the party conference this weekend, they are hoping that some will of action will have some impact in terms of changes in the interim. It's very close to the wire. It is the first thing I'm going to say. And it's one of the, and me and Andy have kind of got used to this being the last minute showdowns, haven't we, Andy, in terms of stuff coming out and things, but this is just really challenging practices.
Yeah. Or I'm just thinking about, is this a bit of an ambush for the party conference season? Because presumably Labour were going to sort of make, it's interesting that the timing is the 1st of April. It's in the middle of their conference. If this was all going well, then it would be quite a positive announcement for them to announce the GP patient charter and the improved access that patients get as a result of this. And does this maybe throw some sand in the wheels and sort of show that the BMA is willing to do this and can sort of play on that politics level? I don't know. Maybe
it is complex. I mean, definitely it's coming through from others that, may not be what we're kind of people thinking of. So from Tablomaster, weak response from the BMA. We should have pressed hard with the collective action last year. Shouldn't have given the government a chance. Different government at that time, I guess, partly when it came into play, but I can understand the emotion behind that and things. Monsieur Ahmed, if we do it and we somehow manage, there'll be more and more and more, and the cost of the profession may be monumental. I think that's absolutely a concern for many people as to how do we maintain some of these real challenges in terms of, in concept as a service position, it makes sense to say, let's just open up online consultations all day, every day. But the reality is the reason why general practice switches off is because it just doesn't have the capacity to manage that for majority of practices. And kudos to those practices who are able to manage that currently in terms of the capacity and things. Let's be clear, that is not every practice, and that is not the majority of practices either. The majority are in a situation where they cannot keep it open, let alone the practices that don't even use online access. And I think that I understand why Wes Streeting it has been quite bullish almost. He's used quite harsh language at times to reference those practices who don't use online consultations at all. Word laggards and that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's not a great term to attribute to, well, let's be clear, the most modern part of the NHS when it comes to healthcare delivery. But at the same time, I think even me as when I've wanted to be a patient, I wanted to use online consultation, kind of felt frustrated when my practice didn't use them. They do now. But I can understand why he's saying that, using online consultations is absolutely appropriate for patients to access the healthcare system in general practice. But this whole thing of not being able to switch on the grounds of safety, like many, I still feel it's a step too far at this moment in time without the resources we need and the safeguardings we need to protect patients as well from practices just not being able to manage. Andy?
Yeah. It's interesting because my practice currently we do open our online consultations for urgent and routine appointments, and we do that throughout all the core hours, and we do manage to for the most part get response out to people on the same day as well. And it's interesting, so I mean we're able to do that, but that doesn't mean that everybody can, and it does make me think actually in terms of us complying with that. Does that actually do the profession any favors, or should we be doing that? We're in a position to do it, but it's not necessarily helpful for the rest of the profession to do that. And of course there'll come a point where there may be other things that the other practices are in a position to do that we can't do, and we might welcome their support in terms of standing firm and not doing those on genuine grounds of patient safety and so forth. So it's just interesting, just making me kind of question our positioning is complicated.
I mean, to be clear, from my perspective in my practice, we've not been able to say that we can keep it open all day long. We have online consultations. We've shifted to that a year ago. Has massively improved access for patients and actually the quality of life for the clinicians as well. But that's recognizing that some days we do just have to switch it off because we just don't have the capacity, particularly days where there are sickness, for example. And that's some of the stuff that this doesn't take into account. What do you do when suddenly half your clinical staff call in sick and you don't have that level of capacity? How can you run a safe service by keeping it open? you can't keep working for umpteen hours and stay safe, because you get either decision fatigue, you'll make errors, you will do harm to other patients based on those decision making processes that you would continue to be making. And quite rightly, I do understand the concerns people have. So if you look at Sashik 1, don't you think it's the same day reply means extending our core hours? It means someone has to be there after 6:30, because it's if you have a request come in at 6:29, you can't reply to it before you shut, because 1 minute is not enough time to deal with somebody's clinical concern, is it?
No. It might be helpful I'll just recap where I guess people have seen the concerns with this, just to run through them. So one is about like this is essentially opening the doors to an unlimited amount of work, because it's uncapped online consultations, and actually sometimes we have patients who send 3 a day. I must be honest. So it's uncapped additional work without additional funding that's linked to it. Yes, there's been an increase in core contract, but that's been for all sorts of things. So there's a concern around, is this properly resourced, let alone is it actually possible, and are there practical and safety concerns? There's the concerns there about pressure on staff. It's actually quite a lot of responsibility, and even though we do execute on this, actually more junior members of staff or some members of staff don't struggle more with the risk management, particularly later in the day. And so it can be quite stressful for anybody dealing with lots of consultations later in the day. So there's those staff pressures. There are the patient safety concerns, and those are, I think, kind of 2 things in there. So one is that actually, as the e-consults hit, it can be difficult to tell what's routine and what's urgent, and it can be hard to prioritize and identify those things that are urgent. If someone submits something saying they've got chest pain first thing in the morning, you've got to respond on the same day. So you might be responding at 6:30, and that person needed to be in the emergency department much earlier in the day. So there's those concerns, and also there's that what happens at 6:29. Can we deal with those things safely? So those are the main things as I see it, and I think generally has been expressed.
And I think, there is some confusion around this. So, Monsieur's again, they come in. Guys, in your views, if we keep online open for routine admin, but close online for acute issues when at safe capacity, are we in breach based on your interpretation? So again, we are not lawyers. We are by no means, union or anything else and things. I guess my interpretation is that you need to keep this open for acutes and urgents all day long, whether you have safe capacity or not. That is irrelevant from the NHS England and by proxy the government's point of view. There is no safeguards put in place, which is the key reason why the BMA have said that there no safeguards have been agreed, which was their position. Now, I know in the background of all this, there is this whole question about what on earth has the BMA been doing for the past 6 months in terms of, progressing this. That's stuff we haven't seen. And also this whole concern of why agree to it if it was never agreed at the time, and put the profession in a place whereby they are having to do this because the BMA has agreed the contract. Is it bad faith? Is it something?
That's another can of worms, Gandhi.
It is another can of worms, but it's a can of worms I think many people in the profession are keen to understand, because we don't seem to have much information around this. And I think
around how that process happened.
Yeah.
Because this is just the contract as it came out in April, isn't it? And then there was a bit of a stay of execution that was agreed afterwards, as I gather. And I believe, so we don't know the ins and outs, but the contract with that wording was with the BMA and potentially went through the BMA without this being challenged at the time. I think that's the rumor, isn't it? So people are working out quite how that happened.
And very much the commentary we're seeing from people at West Street and Stephen Kinnock and stuff, it is that, the BMA agreed this. We didn't agree to put safeguards in. That was up to the practice's responsibility to put that, which, that is a different story to what the BMA are stating. So detail in terms of how we ended up at this situation is absolutely lacking to some degree from either perspective. But it doesn't change the fact that because the BMA have agreed to this, that this is an agreed contract, we are contractually obliged to follow it at risk of breach notice. Now, I am hearing across various areas that ICBs are potentially, working with some practices in their LMCs to be understanding that such a significant change is not something that maybe will happen on day one. But at the end of the day, contract is a contract.
Yeah,
and that's the difficulty.
I was going to say that's what the BMA letter is asking for as well. The BMA letter is to your ICB to say you're going to do it, to protest, and ask to discuss with the ICB about how you can agree some safety measures for the implementation. So that's sort of the final purpose of that letter. And I'm just going to add, Gandhi, it's in the opening paragraphs of the BMA's statement that went up today. They are conceding that practices need to have their online consultation tools open to acute and routine queries throughout core hours. So I think it's quite clear that you're potentially in breach of contract if you don't do that, I think, in terms of the BMA's position on it. So that's interesting. Can I just bring up Barry's comments? It's pull visit doc to deal with triage, stop duty PM clinic to deal with it too. Because that's interesting, because I say we're kind of doing this at the moment. I've been doing it for a few months, but essentially we have pulled resource from other things that we might be doing in order to do it. We've sort of restructured we're of a sort of size where we can make it work, sort of 10.5 to 11,000 patients. So we now have a doctor who previously would have been having sort of planned, scheduled appointments with patients throughout the day and doing some duty doctor work. They're now our duty clinician, and they deal with kind of incoming pathologies, queries, letters, tasks, supervising other members of staff, and a large part of their day is dealing with online consultations. But they don't do any kind of pre-planned or pre-booked work anymore. So it has pulled people away from those things. I guess what the government contracts for, the government gets. So if they feel that they're placing value on this in terms of how they structure the contract and not mandating other things, then the delivery gets pulled away from other things. We kind of we've responded as a commissioned service in that way. So in effect, that's we do still do visits, and we also do clinical work, but we have reshaped it.
I think, well, Andy, I agree, and I think a lot of that feeds into some of this, questions that people have going around about the shifts that they're seeing in general practice. So patients commenting they can't see their GP, that they end up seeing a different skill mix person instead. Part of that is because the GPs have been taken away from doing clinics because of tackling online access in a different way. There is this, question about how much resource will practices have to remove from what they're offering to adjust to deliver online access all day long. And the reality is it will mean less clinicians being available to see patients. That is what's going to happen, because there isn't the resources provided within the contract to allow practices to hire more people. And I mean, this is one of the reasons why we've got a GP employment crisis, where we've got loads of GPs but apparently no jobs for them to work in, because the practices haven't had the reciprocal rise in resources to allow them to fund more posts for GPs. Some practices shifting down, so effectively looking at lower paid skill mix to provide appointments, whilst allowing clinicians to work in a different way, or not even hiring more clinicians because they're having to make cost savings on those bases. And this is all feeding into a difference for perspective for people. But it's again prioritizing access over quality in many situations, and I think that's one of the things many people within the profession, myself included, I think we are shifting still, to a model whereby access is the thing that is only valued, rather than the quality of care that's being able to be offered. And, that's frustrating for many people.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I guess for many people, you could do this, right? But we don't believe that it delivers the best care, for many people out there. And that's behind a lot of the resistance, I think. Just interesting, just pulling something from the chat again, because there's sort of an interesting point here. So this is so Tabla is saying it's an imposed contract which is unmanageable, and then Monsieur Ahmed, who's contributing a lot this evening, thank you very much, says it's not imposed, we signed it off. And it's just interesting to remember. So there was an imposed contract. If we just share screen again. Back in
So the
2023.
prior 2 years, in the last couple of years of the Tory government, they were imposed contracts. So they were not agreed by the GPC. And therefore, there was a little bit more, you could argue, fluctuation or whatever and stuff.
Yeah, because this is where they use this thing called the statutory instrument, where definitely without the BMA's consent, they unilaterally imposed the contract. And they had to use this thing called a statutory instrument, which we kind of covered at the time. But this time, they've just issued a standard variation. It's a different mechanism, which again makes me conclude that they're not using statutory instrument. It looks like this maybe was signed. It's certainly a different way that they're varying it this time, which is interesting. So I just wanted to kind of make that point.
Sure.
So Gandhi, we said we'd run for 30 minutes, and we've got over.
We have gone over. And, well, there's a couple more things I'd like to do, and apologies, I know we're going to run over as a result.
Gandhi, I was going to ask you, Gandhi, are you going to sign the letter and send the letter as a practice? Do you think you don't have to answer that? That's a partnership issue.
Well,
I guess. But what's your thoughts on that?
So I think firstly I'm going to have to discuss that with my other partners, because it's not a decision I'm going to make unilaterally and stuff. I think my impetus would be to look at signing it, because I think there are concerns I've got in terms of I'm a massive fan of online consultations. I've never hidden that, and I believe that they are a great way to help deliver care to patients, and I think they're actually a really smart way for us to work. But is that to the point where online consultation should be switched on from 8 till 6:30 without the compensatory resources to enable that to work? No, because that will impact care. It will mean that we've reduced the number of clinicians that are able to see patients directly. It will mean, in order to comply with that contract variation, there will be a difference in service that the patients experience, because there is not the resources to enable that to function. So on that basis, I'd probably sign it. The additional part, before I let you jump in, Andy, is that GP Connect stuff. As a data controller, somebody else being able to see the records without my control, but I'm legally responsible for that. Someone else being able to contribute to the records, and I'm legally responsible for what they have done if there's an error. That is bonkers. It's absolutely bonkers. And although I do think GP Update Record could be a really powerful tool to help improve care for patients, seriously, how on earth have they got that through the ICO? It makes no sense to me whatsoever. And that clearly puts a liability on practices that potentially is unlimited liability in terms of those ICO fines. Okay, fair enough, it is limited to 15 million or whatever it was. But let's be honest, how many practices are sitting on 50 million pounds in order to pay a fine? No.
Yeah, like 20% of turnover or 100 million, whichever is greater.
Yeah.
I mean, I think,
what do you think?
I think we'll discuss it as a partnership. I think we'll probably land on not signing it. I think because we already deliver it and feel that we can continue to do it, although there is the point about being supportive of colleagues and whether actually it's the right direction for the type of care that we provide. I think actually we would be potentially more concerned about the GP Connect and data controller liabilities and issues actually in there. So that might be a reason for us to sign that bit. And it's interesting they've said delete as appropriate, for the two parts, perhaps acknowledging that some people will have a problem with one and not the other, and providing room for that. But there we go.
Cool. So a couple more things we're going to do. We're going to do our standard section of On Our Wavelength, which is I've found a really interesting one for today's session. But also then after, I think what I would like to do, Andy, is kind of go through just a couple of hints and tips of what people may want to consider from the 1st of October. Does that sound all right?
Yeah, go on.
Cool. All right. So first for the On Our Wavelength. So this is our lovely little game that we've been playing. We're going to keep playing for now until you guys tell us to stop, which is basically comparing the wavelength game and doing that on a general practice point of view. So just as a reminder, where are we? This is the spectrum. So one side to the other. I'm going to give Andy a clue, and he's got to guess where on the spectrum that clue indicates it may be, and he gets points based on that. First time we did this, he got bang on 4. Second time we did this, he just missed, I think it was. So let's see where we end up this time. And our spectrum this time is cardigan GP on this side and militant GP on this side. Okay.
And I joked that Gandhi's going to say his own name, and I have to say where he is on this scale, but maybe he won't do that.
All right, well, let's have a quick look then, shall we? So let's go for that. Let's not go for that one, so I have no idea what I can pick for that. So let's go for that then. Okay. So, Andy, you've got the choice of where you want to go. Okay, and I'm going to go for LMC representative.
Any particular one?
No.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to say take that dial over to 140 degrees.
About there?
Yeah.
Yeah, you happy with that?
Yeah, that's where I'm going. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So if you're watching us live, comment yourself. So this is 0 degrees. This one is technically it's 170. I think it is exactly. Stick that in the chat if you're watching us live. If you're watching this on the replay, stick it down as well. We're going to come back to this just before we sign off. Okay. So I said that we'd also give people some hints and tips of what to do, because I know this is the thing loads of people have been asking us. Just before we do that, we've got a few more comments coming through. So dire emergency. As an IG lead, can we refuse this as unsafe despite it in place in the contract? Apparently we can't, which is what I think is absolutely bonkers, which is why I think the GPC have put this in the letter that's come out and stuff and things. So I think that is...
Your trade union won't support you.
Yeah. And then we've got Faisal Chowdhury. Whilst I understand that some practices might be able to staff this, there will be many practices of substantial salary GPs who are not agreeing to stay past 6:30 when truck covering triage. And that's a valid point. So a lot of practices, their on-call system is actually managed by the partners within the practice. Salary GPs don't do that. And obviously in order to enable, or may do that, but don't cover till 6:30. So weirdly, that last half hour of manning it is actually a real complex point for many practices in terms of how they do that, because that suddenly means having to do the contract variations, which is not something you can do quickly. That's a 3-month time frame. It means paying people more, which again, there hasn't been the compensatory rise in the funding for resources for practices to do that. And also it's the whole fact that some people just don't want to do it. They just don't want to be at work for another half hour. You know,
many partners that are doing it and select staff at my place, not a universal thing that everyone's expected to do.
And you know, that's completely understandable from many salary doctors' positions of why should I work extra when I don't really want to, and I'm already potentially burning out from having to do all this work already. It is a challenging situation. Not forgetting the fact that most partners are probably in a feeling even more of a stressful situation from that particular aspect.
You're just going to lump it, or they're in breach. It's
And I feel sorry for those practices where, you know, it is very much partner light, salaried heavy, where that's going to be an issue. But yeah, anyway. So we said we talk about some hints and tips. I think it's hard to give specific stuff. So I think we'll probably talk more about themes. And the first thing I'm going to preface is with, this is by no means advice for you to do stuff or not do stuff. We are not giving you instructions on what you should do and things, but I guess just sharing our experiences. Do you think that would be a valid way of putting it, Andy?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah. So I think for me, I mean, there are some practices where they use systems currently where they are open outside of the core hours already. So they may, for example, open their online consultations earlier than the core hours. So that allows stuff to come in. So they've got stuff to do at the start of the day. I'm probably thinking those practices may want to shift that to just be core hours, because then at least you shift the timings and then, you know, front load the next day for your capacity, and maybe move towards a model whereby you have appointments bookable in the future that patients can use. And how do you coordinate that system with patients so they can book those slots in advance and stuff? Does that sound about right to you, Andy?
Yeah, sounds like a good tip. Yeah. I'm thinking of a few myself as well, but go on, you get yours out.
Well, I think there's also having the concept of directionary templates for patients to understand where they can go to deal with some of their other health issues. So, for example, if it is something that can be dealt with by pharmacy first, being quite clear this is not something that we will be dealing with. This is something you can access through other parts of the system, and this is where you should be going for your healthcare. And actually, I would argue that ICBs will now have a role in maintaining that. If that's the clinical advice given by the practice, there should be no issues in terms of, dealing with complaints or other kind of things where patients feel that wasn't the service they wanted, because actually practices are going to have to turn patients away, or better yet, signpost them to different parts of the system to receive the healthcare that they want. Thoughts on that, Andy?
Yeah, that sounds sensible. Yeah.
And yes, I was just going to say, so there are templates that people can access. There are various different GP groups and stuff where people are sharing some of this kind of things. And, that may be quite a good place for you to access some of those. I know on eGPlearning, we've got a couple of people wanted to have a look for the Accurix group. It's behind a paywall, but, obviously that's something you could access through other routes as well if you wanted to. Anything that you've got, Andy?
I've got a few things actually, because we've been operating this one way or another for a while. So what I would say is, when you're doing it, like, operate in chunks. People might naturally do this, but be in triage mode for a period of time, and then do something else for a period of time, see patients, process, telephone, and then go back. And when you're in triage mode, like, we do like quite, I would say, light touch triage to get through quite a high volume of things in a short period of time. So we have like quite defined outcomes. What I would also say is booking links in System 1 are your friend. So we have quite a large amount of appointments that can be booked in a few days ahead of time with System 1 booking links that can be text messaged out to patients. If they're not used on the day, then they can be booked on the day through reception, telephone, online, or face-to-face coming into the surgery. But it's a really good way of having a quick outcome for some of the consultations, and then have like just a few standard outcomes, and have standardized text message responses to those to send out. So if it's clearly not something that needs to be dealt with on the same day, then that patient can have a link saying, we've reviewed your electronic consultation, I'd like you to see a member of the team, please use the booking link to book something. And then always have safety netting at the end of your standard responses, obviously, for if things worsen or change in the meantime. But that's quite a good way of looking at something, just saying that it's not necessary to deal any more with that on the day, and you can just get that off your plate. And then have some of the standard responses. So things like, signposting to your normal signposting destinations, your physio service, your pharmacy. So some of the outcomes are, we're going to ring you today. So you have a standard response for that. Always include safety netting. And also, you can ask people for more information. That's an acceptable response to receive on the day. So in my interpretation of an application of the contract, so send me a photo, send me some more information. If that's fine, then the ball's in the patient's court to get back to you. You're obviously carrying the risk for the urgency of that, but you'll have assessed that when you get their information coming in. And also, if you're dealing with things, at 6:29 or after 6:29, you're closed. What you can actually offer that patient on that day is really, really limited. So then your threshold for signposting to other parts of the system where they can receive urgent care, is really quite low. So that could be some of your outcomes. And quite often, I'll ring someone after 6:29 and say, look, we can't deal with it today, we're closed. But to manage this safely, you're going to have to go to the walk-in centre, call 111, etc. And I think that just has to be the response after 6:29. So those are just some thoughts from me. So not advice, not guidance, just thoughts and reflections.
And I think there may also be concepts of people wanting to change how they do things. Interestingly, so Jonathan Kay's made, I'm aware providers such as Clinic prompt the patient to try pharmacy first using this algorithm/AI compared to, say, using Accurix as a triage platform. I know of large practices using Clinic. I think there are increasingly a variety of providers looking at how they can support practices, how they do things, and different tools suit different practices. Those that are very much wanting clinician-based decisions will focus on those that are less involved with automation and AI versus those that automate and do the AI stuff. Clearly have some benefit, but then is the outcome of those what practice would want as well? And that harmony of finding where the sweet spot is for each practice is going to be different. But as things like that, having tools that direct patients automatically to a different part of the system or capture that information in a different way that gives you a more complete information capture without the clinician involvement, maybe tools that actually start to see real traction in the coming weeks and months as this comes into play. Anyway, I've got a specific question from Monjour. So, Andy, have you found using booking links means appointments are actually booked? We found patients didn't book, and then appointments either went empty or got filled by the time the patient got round to doing it.
Right. We need to audit that. That is a fantastic question that we don't actually have the answer to. And it's really easy to determine, isn't it, how many of those text messages that we send out with a link are actually used. So I don't know the answer to that bit. We generally don't run out of them because we police it quite militantly with our reception team that they do not book these links ahead of time. And it's about a third of all the appointments that we have are reserved for the use of these booking through these links, and then if they're not used on the day, then they can be used on the day by the reception team. So we resolved that in order for this to have any chance of working, we have to always be confident that they can use a link to book it. In the early days, when we didn't have enough of these available and the reception team used to gobble them up, we used to get patients sending us more reconsults on the same day, saying the link doesn't work, can't see any appointments. The whole thing just grinds to a halt if you're operating it in that way, if they can't book links. So you just have to make sure that the links are there. Hopefully that helps. I'll do the audit then.
Yeah, so we'll come back to that. And actually, we're going to come back to one more thing, but just before we do that, we're going to go to the wavelength. Okay, so Andy put it there when I said LMC GP, and we got Cardigan GP this side, and we got Militant GP this side. So let's have a little look. Do you think you got it right, Andy? I've got to get this in the middle. It's going to cover my face, isn't it?
Yeah, I reckon I've got it right. That's why I picked that bit.
Yeah.
I'm in the range. I think
you're in the range. Yeah. So definitely a good estimation there. Yeah, a little bit more maybe that way. Yeah. So I went for LMC GP because I thought a little bit more militant, generally speaking, than your Cardigan perspective, but not quite so that it's all the way down there and stuff and things. So hence, anyway, yeah. I don't know where I would have been on that spectrum if you'd given me my name, but hey ho. So we have got loads of stuff coming up for you in the next few weeks. I'm doing a fair few travels because it's conference season kicking off. So obviously it's got the Labour Party conference this weekend, but actually general practice conferences do kick off in the next few weeks with Best Practice, HET, RCGP conference. I'm only going to be at one of those. You can figure out which one when you check out the socials and stuff, as well as various other things going on. Andy, this is the last time you're joining us.
I'm not going to conferences this year. I'm moving house. So this is the last time that you will see me with this particular setup behind. I'll have something different for you when I get settled.
In fact, just so that you get the full spectrum, everyone. Oh no, there we go.
There we go. So we'll see which pictures make the cut in the new place. I'm sure Jean-Luc Picard will be there, but we'll see who else makes the cut.
And as ever, we'll be here to take enhance your primary care and learning, and we'll catch you guys the next episode.